conflict has impacted the United States and American citizens and our economy in a very meaningful way. And the administration has gone to lengths to preserve diplomatic channels, and also the idea that a ceasefire is either in place or will take place. So I do think that that's the correct read. I believe that President Trump does want some type of off-ramp to this conflict, and so is trying to preserve that messaging in the way that he's communicated about this over the last couple of days.
Now, the United States has launched another wave of attacks against Iran this evening, their second within 24 hours. Iranian officials have said the strikes hit an army barracks, killed at least 7 troops and wounded hundreds of people across the country. Speaking this evening at a defence summit, President Trump said Iran was desperate to settle the conflict.
We're doing really well with Iran. The Islamic Republic of Iran is not happy right now. Should have been done 47 years ago. Should have been done at least during the 47-year period. And it wasn't. Other presidents didn't do what was right. They should have done it a long time ago. It would have been much easier. And they want to settle so badly. They don't like what we're doing. And they do want to settle. We'll find out whether or not we settle with them or we just finish it off.
We can speak now to Alia Awadallah, who's a former Pentagon official. Good evening to you, Alia.
Hi, Carole. Thanks for having me.
Really good to have you with us. Look, I think this is the fifth night of attacks and counterattacks now. Where do you think this leaves that supposed memorandum of understanding, which was supposed to be based on a 60-day ceasefire?
Well, just reflecting on some of the clips and conversations that you just shared, I would question the assumption that Iran is eager for a settlement or more eager for a settlement than the United States. The Trump administration, over the past several months of the conflict, has repeatedly advocated for a ceasefire, or even during periods of breakdown and strikes, has continued to say that the ceasefire is in place. So I would question the idea that Iran wants to cease strikes and altercations with the United States more than the U.S. does. But certainly it's meaningful that the administration on the U.S. side has come out and said that the ceasefire is no longer in place, that we are revisiting the negotiation table and basically reverting to where we were a few months ago before there was a temporary few weeks where things seemed to have settled down. But it also it's interesting that Iran is saying that essentially they are not willing to or interested in continuing diplomatic talks with the United States. So that's a very different message than we are hearing from the U.S. side. And so it calls into question the current MOU and also the future of what these talks look like.
So, I mean, that was President Trump himself saying, they're desperate for a deal, they're desperate for a ceasefire. Do you think that is because President Trump doesn't want the whole process to fall apart completely, that he's putting that kind of a slant on it?
Yes, I think that's the right read. For the last several months, I mean, this conflict has impacted the United States and American citizens and our economy in a very meaningful way. And the administration has gone to lengths to preserve diplomatic channels, and also the idea that a ceasefire is either in place or will take place. So I do think that that's the correct read. I believe that President Trump does want some type of off-ramp to this conflict, and so is trying to preserve that messaging in the way that he's communicated about this over the last couple of days.
Yeah, I mean, President Trump is saying that only a show of strength will persuade Iran to basically get back to that agreement. And he's saying that the US is prepared to escalate attacks on Iran day by day, to include power plants and bridges next week. I mean, do you think that kind of approach from the president is going to work when we've seen that for all the huge damage inflicted on the Iranian regime, on its military and so on, they've shown no readiness to back down at all?
I'm incredibly skeptical that approach will be successful. Iran has demonstrated, as you just said, over the last several months that they're willing to go to whatever lengths are necessary to maintain their upper hand and to continue to strike the U.S. in ways that hurt. So it's really hard to fathom what type of impact you could have on Iran that would cause them to back down. Frankly, I think that the ball is mostly in the United States court to decide that we have achieved whatever objectives we set out to with this conflict, and to wrap this up without further strikes, because it just seems extremely unlikely that Iran will be willing to do that, no matter what type of action we take against them, including targeting the infrastructure and sites that President Trump has talked about.
Yeah, I mean, we've had senior Iranian officials also saying that they're going to completely block the Strait of Hormuz again, unless or until the US stops its aggression. This at a time when we've had, as we were just discussing there, President Trump talking about attacking further targets. I mean, what is the situation there now? I mean, presumably there's pretty much nothing moving through that vital waterway in any case, given the scale of the attacks and counterattacks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to think that Iran at this point is not just focused on the immediate tit for tat and back and forth that they've had with the US, but ultimately, if they're able to inflict damage on the US and exact a price for the US operation and operations to begin with against Iran, they are going to find whatever way that they can to do so. So this is sort of the same holding pattern that we've been in, that it's very difficult for any of us in this space to anticipate how you actually get off of this cycle. At one point, one of the parties is going to back down. And candidly, it just doesn't seem like Iran is going to be the one to do it. So I also think it's worth noting that we're coming up on midterm elections in the United States, where there will be a real cost of the economic impacts of this war and American public perceptions of this. And so if I were to guess, I would think that Iran is counting on the US being the one to blink and take that into consideration, because they're showing no signs of any interest in backing down.
Yeah, and I mean, it does seem as though it was Iranian attacks on shipping on 3 tankers that sparked this latest cycle of violence. But I mean, the difficulty seems to be that despite all the damage inflicted on Iran's military, they are still able to carry out attacks on shipping. They can do, though, that with, I mean, relatively small and inexpensive weapons, and by doing so, they're holding not just the US ransom, but the whole many other economies in the region and more widely, because of the importance of getting energy through the Strait of Hormuz.
Yes, you're touching on, I think, the most important point, which is that it's easy, it's inexpensive and painless for Iran to inflict this type of damage, versus the U.S. operations and ability to counter that is much more extensive, both in terms of money, in terms of the munitions that we're expending. Iran is able to keep this going in a low-cost way for the foreseeable future without any real impact to themselves, aside from what we've already seen. So it's hard to understand what would make them back down, aside from the U.S. either deciding that it wants to end this regardless. But to go back to your point, it is correct that, yes, Iran seems to have been the one that instigated this latest flare-up and round of strikes. But again, it's easy and low cost and high impact for them to do so. So it's unclear why they would back down when their approach has been working for them to date.
What do we know about what the Gulf states are going to do? Because it has been disastrous, hasn't it, for places like UAE, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia even. In particular, somewhere like UAE, which has really built its reputation and its economy on being a stable outpost in the Middle East. It has come under attack from Iran, and it has seen, of course, huge damage to that reputation and its ability to export its own oil.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about any entity or parties that are desperate to see an end to this war, I think the Gulf is the number one example of this, because it has impacted their reputations and their vision for stability in a very major way. So I think that they will support any type of negotiation or cessation in conflict that will help them scale back and help them rebuild and regroup from all of this. I also think that we will see them invest a lot of attention and money into building their own defense infrastructure and being able to protect and develop some of the technologies and different foreign investments that they have been cultivating over the last several years, because a lot of this war has completely thrown into turmoil the vision that they had for their own development and their own future. So I would say of all the parties, U.S., Iran, Gulf, or other entities involved, the Gulf is probably the number one actor or group of actors that are eager to see this come to an end in some way.
And of course, the Gulf states clearly pretty hostile themselves to Iran, but they must be pretty exasperated with the way that President Trump has handled this and the effects that it's had on their economies.
Yeah, and I think the reason that they're probably exasperated is that just before this war, the common consensus among analysts of the region is that Iran was at its weakest point, and after many, many years of conflict with the Gulf and with other actors, Iran and the region had sort of settled into a detente that was mutually acceptable. So the fact that this has totally reversed that progress and thrown us into another era of turmoil that the region was sort of eager to work past and to move on with their future and rebuilding. I think that this has taken us back really over a decade in terms of where the Gulf and Iranian relations stand. And so I think their exasperation comes not just from the immediate situation that they're facing, but the fact that in their minds this might have been unnecessary and might have undone a lot of the progress that they had made already with Iran and with addressing some of these long-standing tensions between them.
Alia Awadallah, a former Pentagon official, really good to get your insight tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.